Chapter 1. Do you have a problem with alcohol? Most people listen to this audiobook with that "do I have a problem" question on their mind. Some are hoping that this book will allow them to conclude that they're doing nothing wrong, and they now conveniently have some written evidence to back up and endorse their continuation of their habit. Others are aware that they're no longer in control and want help to stop drinking and to stay quit. Of course, stopping drinking, as we all know, is the easy bit. Staying off the booze permanently, well, now that's the real problem. So let's answer that initial burning question. Do you really have a problem with alcohol? Yes. But you know what? There's not actually anyone who drinks alcohol that doesn't have a problem. Alcohol is, in itself, a problem, and not a solution, as many believe it to be. Therefore, if this substance is in your life in any form, then you cannot help but have a problem. As you will discover in this book, alcohol is an addictive toxin packaged into attractive bottles, marketed with billions of dollars of advertising, and so deeply ingrained in popular culture that we can no longer see it for what it really is. One thing you will quickly discover is that people get very upset when you criticize this drug. They don't even like you referring to it as a drug. Your alcohol drinking friends would tell me to stop being so melodramatic. They will probably argue that millions of people around the world manage to enjoy alcohol responsibly and it doesn't negatively affect their lives in the slightest. Some might go even further to suggest that for some, the occasional drink actually improves or enhances their life. However, this counter-argument to my opening gambit only holds water if you suspend the reality that alcohol is actually a poison created from the byproduct of decaying vegetable waste. That is the truth. And this book is all about opening your eyes to what is going on behind the smoke and mirrors of alcohol. In truth, alcohol is a poison. So with that fact in mind, how can anyone argue that the habitual consumption of a poison is a positive thing? I know that this is difficult to take on board because we're conditioned to see alcohol not as a poison, but merely a harmless social pleasantry. So let me make this easier for you. For the sake of argument, let's replace the poison used in this argument with a different toxin. Let's say hydrogen cyanide, for example. Imagine how illogical it would be to try and defend the consumption of cyanide. Would you say to someone that only uses cyanide infrequently that they were a social user or a normal user of that chemical? Yet this is exactly what we do with alcohol. Now, of course, your first response to this will probably be an objection to the comparison. Many will complain that cyanide kills you stone dead, whereas alcohol just makes you merry. How is that a fair comparison? And it's true that neat cyanide will kill you. But you know what? So will 100% pure alcohol. Heavily diluted cyanide won't kill you, but it will make you very ill. Are we really a million miles away as comparisons go? Once you become aware that the emperor isn't actually wearing any clothes at all, and realize that alcohol is none of the things that the marketing suggests it is, only then can you start to deconstruct some of the popular language surrounding its use. We talk about these normal or social drinkers, the people who can consume alcohol at parties and on social occasions but don't appear to be dependent on it to remain functional. Of course, even the most hardened alcoholic at some point was what we would describe as a social drinker. Before the mousetrap of alcoholism snapped close on them, they were considered just as normal as the next guy. The poor problem drinkers at the time looked at them and wondered why they couldn't drink for fun just like them. And so the cycle of addiction continues. Social drinkers slowly become alcohol-dependent problem drinkers, and instantly, at that point, in the eyes of society, they stop being normal. And then they become weak-willed, pitiful, sad people who, for some reason, can't consume an addictive toxin and stay in control of it. Alcohol is many things, but it is certainly none of the glitzy, life-enhancing things that we're told it is by the advertising agencies or the collectively endorsed lies that have been handed down from generation to generation. We believe some nonsense. We believe that booze makes a party go with a swing, and yet the next day we happily use words of destruction to describe what a great time we had. We stare out from bloodshot eyes with a tongue that feels like a butcher's chopping block, and we gleefully report that last night we were trashed, slaughtered, mashed, hammered, destroyed, wasted. Or 100 other different terrible adjectives that now apparently mean something good happened to us. The marketing for alcohol would have you believe that simply drinking their specific brand of attractively packaged poison will turn you into the next Brad Pitt or Elle Macpherson. In reality, we know how good a drunk actually looks to us when we're sober. Whether they're male or female, it doesn't matter. There is perhaps nothing less attractive than having someone come up to you stinking of booze, slurring a badly thought-out chat-up line as a little bit of saliva drips out of the corner of their mouth. Forget the advertising spiel. The only way you can get more sex while on alcohol is to find someone who is as equally drunk as you. But let me ask you this. Does it really make you a sex symbol if you have to use a drug to get the opposite sex to sleep with you? The more you think about what you are doing, the more ridiculous it appears. We create lots of distractions to avoid the truth about this drug. We claim it as essential to a good party. We think it makes food taste better, and we connect it to social standing. Oh, you must surely have heard that if you can afford to pay astronomical amounts of money for your alcohol, then that makes you a connoisseur and a person who appreciates the finer things in life and not an alcoholic. Listen to a wine expert talk about the latest vintage coming out of the Bordeaux region, and you would think they're describing bottled sex. They talk of a seductive nose and a robust body with a hint of dark chocolate and wild berries. As you will discover in this book, it's all just the ego creating illusions of grandeur to cover up a bad habit that it would rather you keep up because it feels nice, or rather, it stops an unpleasant sensation of self-induced pain. Intelligent and wealthy people have simply found a way to put a veil of acceptability and snobbery over a common drug addiction. Back when I was a drinker, I too got trapped into this illusion of finery and alcohol going hand in hand. I allowed myself to believe that the ritual of carefully selecting a very expensive bottle of wine out of my temperature-controlled wine cellar, decanting the precious liquid into an exquisite crystal jug before holding the glass aloft to admire the deep colour and the rich aroma from the wine meant I wasn't a problem drinker, I was an expert, admiring a piece of art. Some of this art, as I called it, cost me in the region of $500 a bottle. Yes, we might have had to forego the annual family vacation to save money at times, but not surprisingly, my cellar was never forced to endure such austerity measures. My wine cellar was apparently never short of cash, even in the toughest times. Such was the depth of my delusion. And how strange that those expensive bottles of art were bought with the intention to show off to friends with. And yet they were actually normally opened after a bad day at work, sitting alone as I tried to convince myself that I deserved the liquid gold I was consuming. Daddy was not to be disturbed, my ex-wife would tell the children as they were stopped in their tracks en route to excitedly tell me about their day at school. I was just another druggie lying to myself in my basement. I would take a noisy slurp of the fine vintage, drawing the air over the liquid on my palate, and write detailed tasting notes in my journal. Oh yes, I was a connoisseur of the highest order. I could hold my own even with the most seasoned of wine critic. One Friday evening, I took my ex-wife Denise out to a fine French restaurant as a treat. Of course, she was driving, but then she always was. As we walked into the elegantly lit restaurant, the wine sommelier recognized me, his face lit up with a beaming smile. Walking over to us, he warmly greeted me, shook my hand, asking how I was and how the family was doing. He no more than nodded a welcome in my wife's direction before ushering us to the best table in the house. Before we had had chance to sit, he told me that he'd just this week taken delivery of the 2003 Chateau Ponte Canet. It was simply divine, he assured me, as he walked off to get a bottle. Denise glanced at the wine list, and this particular vintage was $350 a bottle. She gave me one of those looks that perfectly encapsulated her feelings about the matter. Words were not necessary. I knew she was thinking, come on, Craig, the kids need new school uniforms, and here you are considering blowing it all on one bottle of wine. When the wine waiter returned and proudly presented the label of the bottle to me, I explained reluctantly that it was too expensive. He nodded, a non-judgmental smile, but shot my ex-wife a disapproving glance. He knew I was an easy sale, but there was an irritating voice of reason present who had spoilt it. He recommended a cheaper but still expensive alternative and poured us each a glass while we enjoyed our appetizers. When our glasses reached a slurp or two away from being empty, he returned with several more wide-bodied glasses, each with an inch or so of dark-coloured, full-bodied red wine pre-poured into them. He placed them all down in front of me, and to my surprise and my wife's disgust, he pulled up a chair to join us. He sat to my side with his back to Denise, reaching across the table to push the first glass towards me. "I would value your opinion, Mr. Beck. These are on the house, all of them. Just tell me what you think," he said with a huge smile. If he could see the expression on the face of my wife, I doubt he would have been so cheerful. I should have seen that this guy had hijacked what should have been a romantic candlelit meal. In reality, I had never planned it as such. It was just another evening activity that I could do that didn't interfere with my drinking. I could have just as easily taken my wife to the theatre, but then I would have only been able to drink before the show and during the interval. A restaurant with alcohol on tap was a much better option for me. Besides, it was too late. My ego had already kicked in. I was flattered to be considered such an expert that this experienced wine waiter would value my opinion so highly. I felt about as significant as you can get. My ego was at pleasure level 10. I picked up the vast glass, cupped it in the palm of my hand, and began the performance us wine aficionados like to give when consuming our favourite drug. I slurped loudly, rolled my tongue around, inspected the colour against the candlelight, and declared my verdict. "Bravo!" he cheered, almost giddy with excitement at my approval. Another glass was pushed forward, and another, until fully 30 minutes had passed by. I don't know how much spectacularly expensive wine I consumed gratis that night, but what a splendid evening I thought it was. I got home elated and drunk, crowing about the extraordinary service and attention we had received all evening. My wife frowned at me and walked up the stairs to bed. She didn't say anything about the evening until the next time I suggested we go there. Her memory of the previous visit seemed to be in direct contrast to my own. She talked about the rude and unprofessional waiter who had ignored her all night and hogged my attention by boring her to death, by droning on and on about his wine cellar. The scene she described shocked me. It was so far removed from what I'd experienced, I even considered that she'd maybe been there on a different occasion with someone else. I was more willing to consider that my wife was having an affair than she didn't enjoy all the free booze that we got that night. Of course, her memories of the night were not clouded by vast quantities of a mind-altering drug. She was right, and I was just another problem drinker who had found a smokescreen to cover my habit that actually worked. I was drinking 1 or 2 bottles of expensive, attractively packaged poison a night, but I'd managed to delude myself that there was nothing wrong in that. I couldn't have a problem because I was clearly a cut above the alcoholic in the park who was chugging back super-strength tins of beer. I was buying and drinking the stuff of kings. This was an indication of my social standing and refined palate, and surely not evidence of a drug addiction. Bullshit. Whether your smokescreen is the same as mine or you've managed to create another entirely different one, it's still just bullshit and nothing more. The sooner you grow up and admit this, the better. It doesn't matter whether you drink cheap plunk or expensive wine. It's all the same thing. Alcohol kills just as many intelligent and wealthy people as it does poor and deprived. It doesn't care how much you spent on the habit. The doctor won't cut you open one day and declare to you that you have the correct type of liver failure, and thank goodness you drank the posh stuff and not that horrible cheap cider. Let me quote you what the World Health Organization says about your drug of choice, and then let me ask you if at any point they refer to the type or quality of the alcohol being consumed. The harmful use of alcohol is a global problem that compromises both individual and social development. It results in 2.5 million deaths each year. Alcohol is the world's 3rd largest risk factor for premature mortality, disability, and loss of health. It is the leading risk factor in the Western Pacific and the Americas, and the 2nd largest in Europe. Alcohol is associated with many serious social and developmental issues, including violence, child neglect, and abuse. It also causes harm far beyond the physical and psychological health of the drinker. It harms the well-being and health of people around the drinker. An intoxicated person can harm others or put them at risk of traffic accidents or violent behavior, or negatively affect co-workers, relatives, friends, or strangers. Thus, the impact of the harmful use of alcohol reaches deep into society. Stop deluding yourself that you're part of something greater or a member of a special elite club. A bottle of wine a night makes you no better than the homeless person swinging supermarket own-label whiskey in the park. Your bottle, sure, it might have a pretty label, but inside the poison is the same. Alcohol is known as the silent killer because so many assume that they'd be able to recognize the signs of a problem early enough to simply stop drinking. The fact that they even consider this illogical nonsense as a safety net is evidence in itself that the mousetrap has already been primed. It's exactly the same as the mouse assuming he would have enough time to avoid the steel trap bar and its deadly spike before it got a chance to hit him. With the problem drinker, this one assumption is the mother of all mistakes, because the organ at most risk of fatal damage from alcohol is the liver. This unique part of the body is a piece of natural engineering that way surpasses the label genius. This one organ is responsible for hundreds of vital functions in the healthy human body. So important is it that it even has the ability to repair itself, and it can even continue to function with up to 70% of its surface area damaged. Now you might think, why would anyone continue drinking if they'd already done that much damage to their liver? And the problem is the liver has very few nerve endings in it, and so you're simply unaware of the damage being caused by the alcohol. Only when the organ itself becomes so swollen from the abuse that it begins to press on the other more sensitive areas of the abdomen do addicts begin to feel something wrong and start to worry they may have caused some damage. As I'm sure you can appreciate, when a human organ is so badly swollen that it's pressing on other parts of the body with enough pressure to cause pain, it must be in a pretty shocking state. Sadly, it is often only at this point that people think about going to the doctor. But often, they'll put it off for as long as possible for fear, God forbid, that the doctor insists that they stop drinking. Often by the time they reach the point where they can't sleep for the pain and they can't avoid the GP any longer do they go and get the tests. Many at this point find out that the damage is irreversible and the only option is a liver transplant. So, you get a liver transplant and everything's fine again, right? Wrong. There are currently 18,000 people in the United States awaiting a liver transplant. So let me ask you, where do you think you would rank on the waiting list next to the child who was perhaps born with a defective liver? Or the woman seriously injured in an automobile wreck? Health services around the world don't look too kindly on people like you who had a perfectly good liver and chose to destroy it. Plus, they will make the assumption, rightly or wrongly, that you will only go on to abuse the donor organ too, and so you may never see the top of that waiting list. So subtle is the drug that most problem drinkers are not aware of the precise moment that control was lost and they became alcohol dependent. There is certainly no point trying to work out when you change from being a social drinker of poison to an addicted drinker of poison. The only fair assumption to make is that anyone who starts drinking alcohol socially, inadvertently, primes the mousetrap the moment they take the first sip. Some people will be destroyed by the mechanism, and others may never feel the harm. But the only true way to ensure that you don't get squashed is to never try and grab the cheese and stay well away from the trap in the first place. Everyone who drinks alcohol is in this cycle. All those strangers, friends and colleagues who you wrongly assume are somehow better than you because they can apparently take or leave a drink. They're still all mice, sitting blissfully unaware of the danger in the trap. The steel bar may snap close on them next week, next year, 10 years' time, or maybe they'll sit there for a lifetime. The only constant is, as long as they continue to consume the addictive drug alcohol, they continue to play a very dangerous game of booze buckaroo. And have you seen what happens when that mule eventually kicks? Society insists that there is a profound difference between people who drink a few bottles of wine a week and a person who drinks to excess on a daily basis. The latter are described as suffering from an illness called alcoholism, and they're labelled as alcoholics, and they're forced by well-meaning support groups to identify themselves by the same derogatory name tag. They're told that they have a condition that is incurable, and they must, for the rest of their life, describe themselves as a recovering alcoholic. Perhaps this bleak and depressing ritual explains why 95% of people who turn to organisations such as Alcoholics Anonymous fail to stop drinking. Now, this book is certainly not here to do down the efforts of this organisation or any other method, because for the 5% of people who do escape from the loop using the big book theory of alcohol cessation, the rewards are truly life-changing. The reason AA doesn't work for most people is because it requires members to use willpower to quit. This is the default weapon for human beings when they identify something in their life that is not serving them. From trying to lose weight to giving up an addictive drug, we always assume the best course of action is to force ourselves to stay away from the thing we crave. The very idea of willpower is an oxymoron. There is actually no power in willpower, and later I'll explain more about that. Drinking alcohol is akin to juggling with fire sticks. There is a decent chance you'll get burnt. The difference in this comparison is you wouldn't then label the people who got injured by the flame as incurable fireaholics, would you? You'd be more likely to say that they unfortunately got hurt as a result of playing with a substance that, used in the wrong context, is dangerous. Using fire for anything other than cooking and heating is not a safe activity, exactly why we scold our children for playing with matches. Using alcohol for anything other than its chemically defined uses as a disinfectant, germicide or fuel is asking for trouble. And yet when trouble inevitably arrives with the use of this drug, we choose to blame the person and not the substance that actually caused the damage. You are not an alcoholic. Nor are you weak-willed or suffering from an addictive personality. You are none of those things. Over 80% of the Western world consumes alcohol, and 80% of those people are no longer in control. If you watch the glamour adverts for the latest designer vodka in high rotation across our television screens, you may find that hard to believe. Alcohol appears to be, if not the reason for the party in the first place, the life and soul of its success. Alcohol is potentially the most dangerous and deceptive drug on planet Earth. I'll say that again. Alcohol is potentially the most dangerous and deceptive drug on planet Earth. Is that overdramatic? As we progress on this journey together, I'll explain why this is absolutely the case. Let me tell you here and now, you are most certainly not alone. Thousands and thousands of people just like you lose control of alcohol every day. That one little drink to help them unwind at the end of a busy day, or the quick pint with friends, has turned from a like-to-have to a must-have. As with all drink-related problems, this doesn't happen overnight. You don't wake up one morning an alcoholic. These problems develop slowly over 5 to 20 years, so slowly that you don't even see them coming. Such is the viciously deceptive nature of this drug that initially there are no negative symptoms to indicate the beginning of a serious problem. As a matter of fact, for most people, the beginning of a long battle with alcohol will appear to be woven with an array of positives. Early-stage problem drinkers may feel lively, confident and carefree when they drink. Eventually they will become known for being able to handle their booze, as though this is a positive trait to be proud of. Often these people are described as party animals or the life and soul of any occasion. So while the chemical is working on your brain, your friends and colleagues are working on your ego. A powerful combination indeed. Many people buy this book not to stop drinking, but rather with the goal of proving to themselves, or even to the caring family members and friends who have questioned their drinking, that they don't have a problem with alcohol. Look, I can sugarcoat this next section for you if you wish. I could spend several chapters building up to it, but look, let's just cut to the chase. And you can decide if you want to agree or disagree before we go any further. Let me fire some questions at you. Have you ever planned your day based on the availability of alcohol? Yes or no? Have you ever made rules for yourself about your drinking? For example, like I used to do. Right, I'll only drink beer, I'm not going to drink any more hard spirits. Yes or no? Has anyone ever questioned you about your drinking? Anyone ever expressed concern that you're drinking too much or too quickly? Yes or no? Have you ever tried to stop or cut down your drinking before and failed? Yes or no? Okay, so here's the results. A yes to any of those questions, my friend, means you have a problem with alcohol. Now, I deliberately don't call you an alcoholic because I know your automatic conditioned response is to defend yourself in the face of such an assault on your perception of who you are. Regardless of how blatant the problem and symptoms appear to be, if you label someone an alcoholic, you will quickly get sold the line, "Hey, look, I admit I drink too much, but I am certainly not an alcoholic." I understand this objection because despite the fact that I consumed on average over 120 units of alcohol a week, and for a period of nearly 10 years, I still refused to declare myself to be an alcoholic. To this day, I point blank refuse to accept that label. I do not believe any of the thousands of people who've stopped drinking via this book are alcoholics either. You are no more alcoholic than an individual who's constantly scratching his head could be said to be a scratchaholic. Alcohol misuse is the symptom of a problem. It is not the actual problem itself. Many people think of alcoholics as disheveled homeless winos who've lost everything. But there are people who meet the criteria for a medical diagnosis for alcohol dependence who are highly functional in society, still have their jobs, homes and families. This type of drinker is known as a functioning alcoholic or a functional problem drinker, whatever label you want to apply to it. They rarely miss work and other obligations because of their drinking, although it does happen occasionally. They usually excel at their jobs and careers. Typically, they are knowledgeable and witty individuals who are successful in many areas of their lives. To all but those who are closest to them, they give the outward appearance of being perfectly normal. I know who these people are because I used to be one. I kept my drinking hidden through some of the most successful periods of my career in broadcasting. If you also have a problem with this drug, currently kept hidden away from your colleagues and family, I will show you how to take control of the situation without anyone needing to know you ever had a problem in the first place.